A secret so profound, so devastating, it's not just a part of you. It is you. It defines every conversation you have, every path you choose not to take, every single day for 40 years. It's a silent, suffocating weight you carry, believing that to reveal it would mean the end of everything you know, everyone you love. She was just a normal woman, a mother, a grandmother. But she was a prisoner of her own life, living a meticulously crafted lie. And then, at the age of 70, she decided to tear it all down. What could possibly drive someone to risk it all and reveal a truth they had spent a lifetime burying? This is a story about the cost of a secret and the breathtaking freedom of finally speaking your own truth. Hey everyone, if you find yourself captivated by stories of courage and the hidden lives people lead, please hit that like button to help this video reach more people. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss out on our next deep dive into the human experience. And if you know someone who needs a reminder of the power of truth, feel free to share this with them. For all intents and purposes, Mary's life was a masterclass in quiet contentment. A tidy home, 2 grown children who visited every Sunday, and a husband who still held her hand on the porch swing. To her neighbors, she was the epitome of a kind, ordinary woman. But as the old saying goes, you never really know what's going on behind closed doors, do you? Because behind Mary's gentle smile and her perfectly tended rose bushes was a secret so heavy it had been a constant companion for over 4 decades. A secret that had subtly, almost invisibly, shaped every single choice she had ever made. As we've established, Mary's secret was more than just a fact she withheld. It was a ghost that haunted her memories. It tainted her joy and amplified her anxiety. For decades, she had managed the burden, but as time went on, the weight began to press down in new ways. The older she got, the more she started to see her life in its entirety. She saw the moments she had held back, the conversations she had avoided, and the quiet, lonely ache of not being fully known, not even by her own family. There's a subtle but powerful difference between being private and being a prisoner of your own past. Mary wasn't just private, she was walled off. Her life was an elaborate set of carefully arranged truths, a beautiful facade with a fragile foundation. And, as we all know, facades are meant to be broken. What was it that finally weakened the walls she had built so carefully? It wasn't a single dramatic event. It was the slow, steady erosion of time and the dawning realization that the person she was protecting wasn't her family, but the younger version of herself who had made the choice to live in silence so long ago. Think about the psychological toll of a lie told for 40 years. It becomes a part of your identity. You start to believe the lie yourself, or at least you forget what it's like to live without it. This isn't just about a secret. It's about a person's entire sense of self, painstakingly constructed on a foundation of omission. And for Mary, as she moved into her 70s, she began to wonder if the truth, no matter how painful, could possibly be more difficult than the constant, quiet strain of living a half-life. It's a question we all face in some way, isn't it? Is the comfort of the familiar worth the quiet desperation it brings? For Mary, the answer was about to change everything. Her family saw her as a rock, a steady anchor in their lives. She was the one they went to for advice, the one who always had a warm cup of tea and a listening ear. What they didn't know was that every piece of advice she gave, every word of comfort, was filtered through a lens of fear. A quiet, subconscious terror that a single misstep might expose the truth. This wasn't a secret she was actively hiding. Every day, it was a part of her. A shadow that followed her, a voice that whispered, "Don't get too close. Don't reveal too much." The weight of it was everywhere. It showed up in the way she would subtly change the subject whenever old family stories came up. It was in her slight hesitation before answering questions about her childhood. Her friends would just think, "Oh, Mary's just a private person." But it was so much more than that. It was an intricate web of self-preservation, a silent psychological fortress built brick by brick over 40 years. Can you even imagine the mental and emotional energy that would take? Constantly editing your own story, living with a curated version of yourself. What was this secret, you ask? Well, we're not going to reveal it just yet. But know this: it wasn't a crime. It wasn't an act of malice. It was something far more human and complex. It was a truth she believed would shatter her family's perception of her, that it would make their love conditional. And so she lived in the silence, believing it was the only way to protect them, and herself. She was a master of evasion, a brilliant storyteller of a life that was just a little too perfect. But even the most perfectly constructed lives have their breaking points. And for Mary, that breaking point was just around the corner. Every great change begins with a tremor, a tiny crack in the foundation that eventually brings down the whole wall. For Mary, that tremor wasn't a sudden earthquake, but a series of quiet, unsettling shifts that began to chip away at her resolve. She'd spent her life perfecting the art of composure, but as she aged, the cracks started to show. One particular instance stands out, a seemingly innocuous conversation during a family dinner. Her granddaughter, bright-eyed and curious, started, asking about old family history, specifically about Mary's parents and her early life in Shujabad, Punjab, Pakistan. Mary, usually so adept at redirection, found herself fumbling for words. The questions were simple, innocent, yet they felt like direct assaults on her carefully constructed reality. She gave vague answers, but she could see the flicker of confusion, then concern in her granddaughter's eyes. It was a small moment, easily dismissed by others at the table, but for Mary it was a thunderclap. The fear that her loved ones might one day realize her life story had significant gaps, not just missing details, but entire chapters. This wasn't just about preserving a secret anymore, it was about the potential erosion of trust. The internal pressure began to mount. 40 years is a long time to carry a burden, and the older she became, the more she questioned the validity of her silence. Was she truly protecting her family, or was she denying them the full picture of who she was? And more importantly, was she denying herself the peace that comes with authenticity? These weren't easy questions, and they swirled in her mind during sleepless nights, making the once familiar comfort of her home feel strangely suffocating. She started seeing patterns, noticing how certain smells or old songs would trigger distant, repressed memories. Memories that, for decades, she had expertly pushed into the darkest corners of her mind. It was like her subconscious was staging a rebellion, forcing her to confront what she had so desperately tried to forget. The weight of omission felt heavier than ever before, transforming from a silent companion into an active adversary. It was in these quiet, reflective moments, often while sitting alone, that Mary truly began to grapple with the possibility of revealing her truth. But what would that even look like after all this time? The turning point was not a grand epiphany, but a quiet, almost imperceptible shift. It was the simple, undeniable realization that her health was declining. Not in a dramatic, life-threatening way, but in the small, everyday losses that come with age. She started to forget things, not just where she left her keys, but details of stories she had so carefully constructed. The fear wasn't about dying, but about the possibility of the truth dying with her, or worse, the possibility of it being discovered accidentally after her passing, leaving a legacy of confusion and betrayal. This wasn't just about her anymore, it was about her children and her grandchildren. What would they think if they found out their mother and grandmother was not who they thought she was? The thought of them having to navigate that painful discovery without her guidance was unbearable. This new fear, the fear of post-mortem revelation, became the final catalyst. It was a race against time, not to hide the secret, but to own it on her own terms. So, she made a decision. a decision that had been brewing for years but now felt both terrifying and absolutely necessary. She decided to write it all down, not just to confess, but to explain, to give context to the choices she had made, to paint the full picture of the events that had led her to live a life in silence. She wasn't sure what would happen next, or if her family would ever speak to her again. But she knew that for the first time in 40 years, she was doing something not out of fear, but out of love. A love for her family so deep that it demanded the truth, no matter the cost. She was ready to take that first terrifying step. The first crack had become a fracture, and the world she had built was about to come crashing down. So, she wrote the letter, 40 years of silence condensed into a few pages. It wasn't an easy task. Every sentence was a battle between her need for honesty and her fear of the consequences. She chose to address the letter to her 2 adult children. It felt like the right way to begin. A private, controlled confession before it potentially went public. She had to choose her words carefully, not to excuse her actions, but to help them understand. She explained the why, the context of a decision made by a much younger, more vulnerable version of herself. The letter was a masterpiece of emotional honesty. She spoke about the love she had for her children and how that love had been the very reason for her silence. She admitted her fear, her shame, and the quiet regret that had followed her for a lifetime. She left the letter on the kitchen table, a silent bomb ticking in her own home. Then, she did the hardest thing she had ever done. She left the house and went for a long, aimless drive, giving her children the space to read her truth without her presence. The wait must have felt like an eternity. For her children, reading that letter must have been like watching a movie of their lives and realizing the main character had a secret backstory they never knew. Everything they thought they knew about their mother was suddenly in question. The memories, the anecdotes, the very foundation of their family history felt like it was shifting beneath their feet. How could they not have known? How could she have kept something so massive from them for so long? The hurt wasn't just about the secret itself, but about the decades of perceived dishonesty. It was a truth that didn't just change the past. It redefined their present and cast a shadow on their future. The aftermath of the letter was what Mary feared most. There was no immediate forgiveness or understanding. Instead, there was a raw, visceral hurt. The initial conversation was filled with difficult questions. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Who are you, really? Was our childhood a lie? Mary, for the first time in her life, didn't have a practiced answer. She could only offer the truth, stripped of any facade. She spoke about the circumstances, the shame she felt, and the impossible choices she believed she had to make decades ago. She wasn't just defending herself. She was revealing the full, flawed, and complex human being she had always been beneath the surface. This wasn't a quick fix or a simple apology. It was the beginning of a long, painful process. The trust that had been built over a lifetime was now fractured, and it would take time and a lot of painful conversations to repair. Her children weren't just dealing with a secret. They were grappling with a new version of their mother, one they didn't know how to relate to yet. This was a moment of profound vulnerability for everyone involved, a collision of past and present. The silent lie had been so much more than just a secret. It had been a structural part of their family, and now it was gone. The revelation had been made, but the consequences were just beginning to unfold. The quiet life Mary had so carefully maintained was over, replaced by an uncertain, emotional, and deeply honest new reality. The truth was out, but what would be its ripple effect? Would her family ever be the same? And what about her husband, who was still in the dark? The immediate aftermath of the confession was not a Hollywood reconciliation. It was messy, painful, and deeply human. Her son, who had always seen his mother as a rock, felt a profound sense of betrayal. He felt that the stability of his childhood was a curated illusion. His anger was less about the secret itself and more about the lie. How do you trust someone who you find out has been living a different life for 40 years? The emotional ground beneath him had shifted, and he was struggling to find his footing. Her daughter, on the other hand, reacted with a different kind of pain, a feeling of loss and a deep well of sadness for her mother. She saw the years of silence not as a betrayal, but as a prison. She started to understand the small, strange behaviors and the subtle evasions from their past. Her grief was for the person her mother could have been if she hadn't been carrying this enormous burden. This emotional ripple effect wasn't just confined to her children. It soon spread to her husband. Mary had to tell him next. Telling her husband was perhaps the most terrifying moment of all. Their relationship was built on a foundation of unspoken trust, of shared history. How do you tell the person you've been closest to for decades that a fundamental part of your identity has been hidden from them? The revelation wasn't a whisper, it was a shout. His reaction was a complex mix of shock, hurt, and eventually, a deep sense of sadness for his wife. He had spent his life with a woman he thought he knew completely, only to find out there was a part of her he never saw. The ripple effect extended far beyond her immediate family. When the secret was finally shared with her close friends and community, the reactions were surprisingly varied. Some people were judgmental, feeling she had misled them for years. A few pulled away, unable to reconcile the person they knew with the one revealed. But a powerful and unexpected response came from those who chose to understand. They saw her vulnerability, her immense courage, and the weight she had been carrying. They didn't see a liar. They saw a woman who had been a prisoner of her past and had finally found the key to her own cell. This phase was a painful but necessary cleansing. Mary had to face the possibility of losing people she cared about, but she also discovered a deeper, more authentic connection with those who stayed. Her family, after the initial shock and pain, slowly began to ask more questions. Not to accuse, but to understand. They started to see her not as the perfect, placid matriarch, but as a complex human being with a history that was far more dramatic and heart-wrenching than they could have ever imagined. The secret didn't just change her, it changed how her family saw themselves and their own capacity for forgiveness and empathy. The ripple effect was turning from a destructive wave into a current of new understanding. The immediate storm of the revelation eventually gave way to a powerful, unexpected calm. For Mary, living in the open, even with the residual pain and awkwardness, was a form of freedom she hadn't known was possible. The constant, gnawing anxiety of being found out was gone. She no longer had to monitor her words or carefully navigate conversations. She could simply be. This wasn't just an external change, it was an internal one. The psychological weight she had carried for 40 years had finally been lifted. She was sleeping better, her posture seemed to straighten, and a new light appeared in her eyes. This newfound freedom allowed her to form deeper, more authentic connections with her family. Her children began to ask questions not out of hurt, but out of genuine curiosity. They wanted to know the full story, the person behind the facade. They started to see her as a whole person, with flaws and a difficult history, which oddly enough made her more relatable, more human. The distance between them, initially created by the secret, was slowly being bridged by a new kind of honesty. The relationship was no longer based on the illusion of perfection, but on the reality of shared vulnerability. Her husband, too, became an anchor in this new reality. After the initial shock, his love for her proved to be unconditional. He had built his life with her, and the truth of her past didn't change his feelings. If anything, it deepened his empathy and admiration for her strength. They were a team, navigating a new, more honest chapter of their lives together. He had to learn how to forgive, and in doing so, their bond became stronger than ever. The secret had been a wall between them, and its removal allowed for a level of intimacy they had never experienced. The final stage of Mary's journey wasn't about forgiveness from others, but about self-forgiveness. She had to come to terms with the choices she made as a young woman, to see her younger self not with shame, but with compassion. She started to use her story as a tool for connection, subtly sharing pieces of her experience with others. Her journey of living in silence for so long gave her a unique perspective on the importance of authenticity and the immense power of telling your own truth. This wasn't about fame or a book deal. It was about finding peace. Mary's life, once a meticulously hidden secret, had now become a quiet testament to the idea that it's never too late to live authentically. She found a purpose in sharing her journey, not as a cautionary tale, but as a message of hope. She proved that the past doesn't have to be a prison. It can be a foundation for a new, more honest future. The relief was palpable, and it radiated from her in every conversation, every interaction. She was finally, truly herself. So, what is the true legacy of Mary's story? It's not just about a secret. It's about the human condition. It teaches us that the lies we tell to protect others often end up hurting us the most. It reminds us that authenticity is not a one-time decision, but a continuous journey. Mary's courage didn't just transform her own life. It became a quiet, powerful message to everyone who knew her. A message that it's never too late to break free from the past and build a new foundation based on honesty. Her story became a lesson for her children, a testament to the idea that their mother was not a perfect one-dimensional figure, but a resilient woman who had navigated immense challenges. It helped them understand that every person has a backstory, a history filled with choices and circumstances that shape who they are. This deeper understanding fostered a new kind of empathy within their family, a more compassionate way of relating to one another. The secret had been a wall, but its revelation created an opportunity for connection, a chance to build bridges where a chasm had once existed. Her life became a quiet revolution. She showed us that the most profound changes often come from the most difficult truths. The courage to be vulnerable, to expose one's flaws, is a superpower that can heal not only ourselves, but also those around us. Mary's story serves as a beacon of hope for anyone living with a secret, anyone afraid to tell their truth. It asks us a simple but powerful question. What are you still carrying that you no longer need to? The weight of the secret was a part of me for so long. I forgot what it was like to be light. But now I am simply me. And that is enough, and that is her legacy. Not the secret she kept, but the truth she finally told. Thank you for watching.